Welcome. This is my channel and I tell stories of the mysterious, twisted, and paranormal. So please stick around and consider subscribing and turning on your post notifications. Now, I got a story for you today that will entertain you, so relax and enjoy, and remember, as of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own. So let's go. Now, these flames engulfed the house and lit up the Alabama night sky. This residence was in a small town of Kinston. The plight of the burning structure had escaped the notice of every person in the town, and as the home burned to the ground, a shadowy figure ran to the car parked in front of the house. Then the car sped off into the night, and its driver was Michael Kenneth McClendon. And the burning house was his mother's home. And the terror that that small town was about to face had only just begun. Michael was born on September 19, 1980 in Alabama. And he was actually raised by his aunt and uncle because at a very young age, his parents divorced. And Michael was a very bright child and was an A student in high school. And he graduated in 1999. Now, he lived in southern Alabama, which was hit very hard when the country went through the worst economy since the Great Depression. And finding a job in Alabama's depressed economy was extremely difficult. Many of the textile jobs were sent overseas, so to make ends meet, he moved in with his mother in Kinston, a town in Coffee County, and Kinston only had a population of 540 people. Remember that. Now, Michael always aspired to become a police officer, so he applied to Samson Police Department and was accepted to attend their police academy. But as fate would have it, he was unable to handle the training. So Michael dropped out of the academy just after 2 weeks. And from there, he went to find a job at Reliable Products in Geneva. He worked in the warehouse and then was eventually let go in 2003. Now, after this, Michael grew increasingly frustrated because he couldn't make it as a police officer, which was his dream job. And his work history consisted of low-skilled jobs in which he never stayed for long. Plus, he also tried to join the Marines, but was unsuccessful as well. So, he was 28 years old, living with his mother, had limited skills, and only had a high school education. So, his choices were not plentiful. So he and his mother eventually got jobs working for Pilgrim Foods, which was a poultry processing plant, but their employment was suspended in 2006, and they, along with the other workers, filed a lawsuit against the company involving compensation that was due. Now, Michael's last job was working for Kelly's Foods, which was a factory that produced sausage, and his position there was team leader, and he was well liked by his coworkers. Despite this, Michael was still unhappy. He felt like a failure and wanted a real career. But instead, he felt that he was condemned to a life where he would only work these menial jobs for minimum wage. Plus, he was further upset that his mother was not being supported by the rest of the family. And as for his father, well, he disappeared from his life a long time ago. With Michael, the one thing that really gave him a sense of significance was his guns. He had been collecting them for years and assembled quite an arsenal of weapons. He had been storing them in his mother's home without her being aware of it. And he had AR-15s, Soviet SKS, a Bushmaster, and a .38 caliber pistol. Plus, he had also been amassing a huge quantity of ammunition. You see, Michael became very depressed and began fantasizing about how he would strike back against those who were keeping him down. and his fantasies became obsessive and gave him actually a sense of joy in the world where he felt helpless before. And eventually he stopped fantasizing and started developing a plan. And that plan was implemented on March 10th, 2009. So when his mother was sleeping that night, Michael opened her door ever so slightly. He walked right up to the head of the bed and then shot his mother right in the head. And whether he felt any remorse at that moment, we will never know. But I doubt it, since right after that, he went to shoot her 3 dogs and then piled their corpses on top of her. Michael then got a pile of clothes and covered the dead body with them after he poured gasoline on the pile, lit a match, and ran out the house. From there, Michael got in his car, which contains his weapons and ammunition, and then drove off toward the town of Samson. And while doing so, he indiscriminately began to shoot anybody that he saw along the way. And at this moment, Michael was no longer a human being. Michael was now a monster. So when he reached Samson, he drove by his uncle's home, who was James Alfred White and was 55 years old, and at the moment was sitting on his porch when Michael shot him, killing him instantly. Then, a few houses down, with the home of his cousin, who was 34-year-old Tracy Michelle Wise, who was the daughter of James White, and Michael unfortunately killed her with a single shot as well. Now, if you think this story is already crazy, just wait a second. It's about to speed up to a point you wouldn't even believe. Michael continued driving down the block and shot his second cousin, 15-year-old Dean James Wise, and their neighbor, 31-year-old Andrea Dawn Myers. And Myers was the wife of Geneva County Sheriff Josh Myers. So when Michael shot Mrs. Myers, he also shot her child, 18-month-old Corrine Gracie Myers. At this point, Michael was driving and he reached the last house on that block. And it was the home of his grandmother, 74-year-old Virginia E. White. And Michael fatally shot her as she stood in the doorway of her own home. I mean, you talk about a story that could literally be a movie. And at this moment, you could imagine the tragedy that just happened along with Michael feeling like everything for once is finally just great because he's living out his sick, twisted fantasy that sadly became a reality. And at this moment, Michael actually continued driving until he saw a pedestrian walking along Wise Street. And Michael shot him dead and then just continued to drive. And at this point, he headed for the town of Geneva. And while doing so, he passed the Inland store where Sonia Lolly Smith, who was 43 years old, was shopping there. And once again, Michael pulled out his gun and shot her. After this, Michael's final victim was a motorist that had passed him on the road as he was headed towards Samson. Michael was traveling on Highway 52, making his way toward Geneva, and as he passed the Walmart, he fired shots into the store's window, and a state trooper witnessed the shooting and pursued Michael. The state trooper immediately called for reinforcements as Michael led him on a high-speed chase, and despite their speeds, Michael managed to fire 7 shots at the pursuing patrol car. And the state trooper, while driving, was hit from one of the bullets, but luckily it only hit him in the shoulder and he only suffered minor injuries. But then Michael sped off, and as he approached Reliable Metal Products, Michael shot another police car pursuing him, and that officer was Frankie Lindsay of the Geneva Police. And at this point, Michael still refused to pull over. So when Michael reached Reliable Metals, he got out of his car, he ran into the building, and then he shot himself right in the head. So I guess we will never know the sick thoughts that were going on in Michael's mind as he went on this 11-person killing spree and also wounded 6. He took the coward's way out. And that is the reason we will never truly understand what was going on in his sick, psychopathic mind. So think about a town with 540 people, killing 11, wounding 6, hurting so many families and lives. He basically took out over 2% of the population of that town. Think about it in that way. This story is absolutely crazy. So just remember, the next time you meet somebody you don't know, whether they're 30 years old or 60 years old, always try to make them feel wanted and give them praise, because it could change their day or possibly change their life. Maybe with a little more love in Michael's life, he wouldn't have transformed into such a monster. That might have been a hard one to hear, but thank you for listening to these stories. I will be uploading stories 2 to 3 times every week, sometimes with multiple stories in them, so please, if you enjoyed this, take a moment to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up and share this video to everyone that you know. It is the most important part. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.